Welcome to another edition of FITTV, and we'll be right back. There are more than 50 ways to leave your lover, and now divorce is a serious mental public health issue. Since the rise of divorce in the 70s, when the song was aired that you just heard, families in transition are experiencing the highest divorce rate in the world. But it wasn't until a generation after these children of divorce that we began to experience the fallout. Parents feeling the pain and their children unable to come to terms with the dysfunction, the delinquency, the promiscuity, the teen unrest, and the legacy of divorce that they are left with is a major task indeed. And I have with me to discuss the topic of children of divorce and the damage control is Debbie Byrne, who's an MSW, LCSW, and trauma specialist. So, why don't you, out of your experience, tell us a little bit about what your experience was that got you here.
Well, what's gotten me here is I've been a therapist and social worker, licensed therapist in the state of New York, and I've been a family therapist for about 35 years. And for the past 30 years, I was the mental health consultant for big corporations. My last position was as the mental health consultant for NBC. I'd say about 75% of the employees that came to me for help, the problem involved marital discord.
That's where you began?
I beg your pardon?
That's where you began?
That's where I began. And I'm surprised as I sit here today how much I thought I knew then, but the reality is how little I knew. There were not, although the divorce rate was burgeoning, people were really not paying a lot of attention to it. I think people were much more interested in the freedom that was coming about for that generation that was able to unload their spouse and make a different life. And basically, what was happening to the children was ignored.
People don't realize that that particular time in history you're talking about, primarily in the 60s and 70s, that changed everything from that moment on. Divorce began to multiply itself during that time.
And the shame base went away from it. And although there's still plenty remaining, it's more private, less public. But I think what's happened now is late in the game, we're realizing, and I would more and more see in my work as a counselor, as, you know, I was seeing the parents who was thinking about the children. And the lawyers weren't, only the custody issue. But what was really happening to them was really quite serious. And I don't think that it was really taken seriously until probably maybe the last 6 or 7 years. And my experience has been there's some very good literature out there, but the study that was done by Judith Wallerstein, who took children, she started about 25 years ago, and she took children who were just from newly divorced families, and she followed them through grade school. And then she followed the same, I think it was about 25 children through high school. And then she followed them, you know, through late adolescence, and 3 books came out of that. First one, I can't remember the title.
So what
Second
about the
one,
kids? What About the Kids was one of them.
Well, What About the Kids was the latest one that she wrote.
The Hidden Legacy of Divorce.
The Hidden Legacy of Divorce. Okay. And that was, she wrote that book when those kids from 25 years ago began to get into relationships of their own and were having trouble, significant trouble with their own little kids. And they came to her because they got quite close to her and knowing her all these years and started to tell her, you know, we're not through with the damage.
So some of these books, these studies, took kids that were young in divorce, in the divorce process. They were,
Right.
the parents had divorced while they were young, right?
Yes.
And then she tracked them. It was a
Yes.
tracking study.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And what the results were?
The results were that it was obvious that even in those years of forming their own relationships, the damage was very obvious to the people that were involved. They had the same trust issues. They had the same trauma issues. They had a lot of things that were never processed when they should have been. And it made Dr. Wallerstein think of writing this next book, What About the Kids? And it's a very frank, instructional, how-to, almost cookbook for people to read that clearly makes it obvious from each stage of life developmentally how it affects kids, and it's cumulative. And if you don't arrest it at any particular stage,
Right.
and you don't do the right thing, you just keep carrying all the damage to
Right.
the next stage.
The name of this organization is Families in Transition. It's FITTV, Families in Transition Television. We noticed transitions also. And some of the statistical information we came upon would say that what she has done is probably a good idea for all of us to look at. So people who watch this program are going to want to see something like that. By looking at this book, they might help themselves understand this problem that they may be having with their kids, and it might be good for the people who are contemplating divorce.
Absolutely.
Not a bad idea, right?
I think that my feeling is, Chris, that you get a divorce and you make this unbelievable, world-shaking decision when you are at the angriest state of your life and your brain has the least clarity. And basically, can you imagine that you make a world-shaking decision, that you decide to buy a business, you decide you'd probably want to have more clarity when you're buying a house.
Sure.
And here, this is all the lives of your family, including, by the way, your own parents, if they're living. It affects relatives. It affects everybody in the family. And you make this world-shaking decision, and you're so angry that you can't think of anybody else, frankly, but how angry you are.
It might be unclear to some people, but the reality of where you are when you're in divorce is a transition itself. And any time a transition occurs to you in whatever form it comes in, whether it's a job or, because people have to get used to getting a change in the job too, don't they? Or
Right.
a neighborhood changes. There's 3 or 4 people in the neighborhood that weren't there before, and they have lots of kids. Before there were no kids on the block. Whatever happens to you in your life in transition, quick decisions are rarely the correct ones. It's an accident when that happens, right?
Right, right.
So we want to study that. So I would like you to explain those things that kids go through in the early years, so we can help. This is something that we haven't done before on this show. So if we can focus on what happens to the kids, take the earliest up if you could.
Well, I'm going to even simplify Judith's work and boil it down to even more simplicity, because I think that's what people need. You don't want to overwhelm them thinking that they have to have
Right.
a PhD in
Right.
psychology
Right.
in order to do this. Let's take the young group, 3 to 5-year-old. And the reason 3 to 5-year-old group is very important is that most divorces occur, believe it or not, even though it might make you laugh because of the 7-year itch, occur around the 7th year of marriage. By that time, generally speaking, people have had 1 or 2 children. And the average age of those children is in this age group, 3 to 5. So I would say that probably a great majority, I don't have an exact statistic, but a great majority of the children that will will find out about divorce and go through that early period will be in that age group. Well, let me explain to you something about that age group. The way I was brought up, adults felt that those kids didn't mind. Those kids didn't know anything. It didn't matter. They'd forget about it. I think they looked at all crises like that.
They think the parents were thinking, this is an adult decision. How then, therefore, could a child of 3 totally comprehend my state of being?
Well, not only totally comprehend, couldn't comprehend at all.
Not at all, right.
Well, that is so far from it. It's correct, but it's so wrong at the same time. The child doesn't benefit from the ability to understand what's going on, but they feel what's going on. Mm-hmm. And let me just explain to you something about the brain. What happens is the thinking part of your brain is here. These are the cognitive part of the brain. And when the child is born, those are undeveloped. But the back of the brain is the primitive limbic system of the brain, where that brain is part of the brain is operating from the time you are out of the womb. And what happens is that's the thing that makes you cry when you're hungry, that makes you...
The sensing and the emotives.
That's
okay.
right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Sensory motor.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to operate, or it's because it's a survival brain. Mm-hmm. Well, so the child experiences, obviously, hunger pangs. And that message from the brain goes back to the brain, well, I'm not comfortable in my tummy. And then that gives the message to the vocal cords to cry. And then the child cries, and that signals the mother or the caretaker to come and feed the child. And then the child survives. Well, what happens is that when there's tension and fighting in the family, at a very young age, child by 3 months even certainly gets to recognize the mother and father's face, other people's face. You smile,
sure.
They smile.
Their excitement, their smile. I was just going to say that. Their sounds, their voices, their temperament and mood, style, all that stuff's to develop.
Well, that's being processed in this survival part of the brain. It is not, there's no thinking process. But cellularly, you smile,
sure.
You're the baby,
sure.
I smile. There's a memory. It's almost like it's an experiential memory, a feeling memory that's cellular, that the child had that good feeling and is stored in the brain. The child also, when it's met with an angry mother, when it hears yelling, it hears voices that don't sound pleasant, the child brain is also actively recording those feelings in a feeling way. And I don't know if it's ever happened. I'm sure it has, Chris. It happens to all of us. You can wake up one morning or you're walking along the street and all of a sudden you don't know why you feel anxious.
Right.
And you can't connect. But the thing about it is we know now from PET scans something triggered that. And it fed into that part of the limbic system of the brain. And because you can't figure it out, you continue to feel anxious.
Sure. So for those of you who are watching the contemplation of divorce or acrimony or anger, developing for your child, at very, very early ages, those responses, those feelings that child may have,
yes,
connect later on in life. Am I getting this?
Absolutely.
So the idea that one can treat the child as if they were too young to understand would be remiss.
Well, the problem is it's partially right. They are too young to understand on an intellectual level.
Well, not to be affected by then.
Not to be affected.
Okay,
that's
right. Good.
But the devastation is the greatest because there's no place that they can go for it. Now, also, if later years...
Let's go up in years in terms of what you want to do because we've got 15 minutes left.
Okay. What happens is in later years, Chris, the brain, the cognitive part of the brain begins to probably develop probably around 8 or 9 years of age and is fully developed by adolescence. That doesn't mean you know anything by adolescence.
Yeah.
It's a fully grown computer, but it's empty of data.
Yeah.
And that's why the adolescent can't make good decisions either.
Right.
But getting back to what we were talking about, at least the older child can soothe themselves. The older child can think. They can call a friend. They can turn on the television. The 3 to 5 year old who's just experiencing, and younger, experiencing all this feeling, they have no idea what to do with it.
Debbie, the bulk of people are experiencing the ages above 5 as a problem era. up to teenagers. So is there a select way to handle that particular aspect, those
Oh,
particular
there
years?
certainly is a select way. I'm just, as I say, emphasizing this because this group needs to have the
They need the
parents
attention.
sensitive
They need the attention, right.
and can do all the, this is the thing, the parents have to do the processing for the child. Okay, the other group of children that you're talking about have probably learned some ways of soothing themselves. Turn on the television, call, talk to a friend in school. But they're affected because they can't really, in an adult way, the brain still, that I would say 6 to 10-year-old, can't really understand why this has happened. And it's a very self-centered age. And of course, what it's all about is what's going to happen to me. And the parents are being self-centered because the divorce, they feel, is about them, and they're worried, and rightfully so,
Which
what's
age
going to
group-
happen to me?
Which age group is affected more by that self-incrimination issue that the kids have? Because a lot of people talk about that subject. Well, the kid thinks it's their fault.
I think it's right from the,
It could go all the
3
way.
years old on, although they don't know it. But I think primitively, probably from 4 on to probably early adolescence.
Okay.
That group feels that maybe they did something, but particularly I would say the 4 to 6 or 6 years old.
The picture you're painting here, from what I'm gathering at it, this is Humpty Dumpty basically in a divorce when it comes to the kids, about the pieces falling over and how we put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Right.
Couldn't we say in a real sense that it'd be very difficult to say that kid would have developed differently had they not been divorced? Certainly you can assume that.
No question about
Certainly
it, but
assume
I
that.
can honestly tell you, if you understand the developmental needs of each age group and can fit it in with your kids, and you can be the parent you need to be at that particular age, the child can come through this okay. Divorce doesn't have to be the end of the world. And some kids can really, we're told, studies have said some kids become more independent, some kids become actually more competent.
Well, the idea that they can't be affected is not likely.
It's
Probably not even possible.
It's not possible.
Right. There'll be different people simply because of the nature of the divorce.
Different
One should
people.
know that the people that you're building, because when you're talking about rearing children, we're talking about work in progress, that a divorce changes something forever. Would that be fair?
Something forever,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
But I think you can work hard and you can reinstate a lot of the things that they lose. They may lose the sense of safety. On the other hand, if their life has been able to have decent continuity and the parenting has been wholesome enough, they have the self-esteem in their memory to say, geez, I got through that. I can do that. So negative experiences don't always translate to negative results in a person.
Right. I don't expect that we're going to probably cover every mental health issue that can possibly be had in a divorced child, but we have to try to manage this somehow. So what advice could you give? We have another 10 minutes, we have plenty of time, but what advice would you give in each age group? How would you summarize the advice? Let's start with the 3 to 5 and work it up.
In the 3 to 5 age group and 0 to 3, I think that the parent has, the main custodial parent, and hopefully both parents, have to reassure the child that they're safe. Reassure the child that they're not going to go away. You know, kids that age group, they have no sense of time, Chris.
Right, yeah.
And if daddy's gone, he's gone forever.
Yeah.
He's not coming back. And there has to be, you know how the bedtime stories, you know, you have children, you know that they want the same story over and over and over again. It's kind of boring for the parent, but the kid it thrives on that repetition. That's security for them. Well, the story that dad is going to come back, that mom is going to come back, there's the changes that mom probably has to go from maybe a full-time mom at that stage of the game to working, that mom is going to return. The custodial parent needs to try to be with the child or find ways of making the child know that they're available. That's one of the most important tasks they have to know. And if they can have that from both parents, from dad and mom, they can thrive very nicely. No one's to say that negative change, you can't pick. Human beings are very flexible. We'd probably be extinct if we weren't.
Yeah.
And we can adjust.
I want to give you a question we hadn't talked about, just to see on the fly how you'll handle it.
Right.
We know that first, the divorce has created an absence of fatherhood more than it has created an absence of motherhood. Still, judges are still giving custody 85% of the time to mothers. Now, I'm not saying fatherhood above motherhood, motherhood above fatherhood,
right.
but we certainly have a society which has been not reared by fathers as much as we should.
Right.
Couldn't you
Right.
say, that staying together or joint custody law, for instance, if it were passed, would be an advantage in mental health?
If the parents can do it, of course it's optimum. And of course it will work for in the child's benefit. The trouble is that in my experience, Chris, I've rarely seen that the parents can do it. There's so much acrimony, so many emotional issues that the parents have that they don't process.
You know, that one of the reasons that occurs is because of litigated divorce. We've seen a track record on mediated divorces, and the mental health in joint custody is extremely high. Mediated divorces, it's about 85–90% of the time. So it's a huge percentage of joint custody. In the litigated divorces, it's a small percentage. But the dysfunction adds up higher on the litigated divorce versus the mediated divorce.
Oh, absolutely. But what my experience has been, and maybe I see the people when they're so angry and so out of control, what's happened is they don't want mediation. What they want,
the heavy acrimony is a difficult mediation.
And I hate to say it, but that lawyers benefit from that.
Yeah.
And absolutely, mediation would be the best thing for these people.
Yeah, we consider mediation an optimum environment because at least you're creating your divorce, so to speak. You're making it work for yourself. Who knows your family better than you? So the amount of compliance is easier. The child support is easier.
You're also being unselfish.
Yeah.
You're also not
sharing.
being self-centered. You're sharing.
Right.
And that's what I have found from the people who come to see me, is that they're not in a sharing mode.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a fighting mode, and they're really, they're so angry that they can't get past it.
Let's quickly handle alienation. Parental alienation is a hot topic.
Hot topic.
Alec Baldwin wrote that book, and
Yep.
I read the book. It was an excellent book, by the way.
Excellent.
Very, very nice
I heard
book.
him speak.
Oh,
I heard him review the book.
He did a fantastic job, and I did a thing about him. I'm going to do another one soon, but he basically lays out why the litigation process is a killer for families and children. It's a very difficult process. What do you have to say about alienation? It exists at all levels. Even in happy families, we've seen, because alienation's could be anything. It could be a raised eyebrow. You can alienate the other parent or create an unnatural or uncomfortable environment by simply throwing out a negative. Oh, it's your father, handing him the phone, that type of thing. So that's a very, very significant. It happens all the time.
Happens all the time, and basically it's just a continuation of the rage from the divorce. And well, it can certainly happen when parents stay together.
Right.
And child is alienated this way. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that the parent is whichever sex it is a role model. So for the girl, she doesn't have very secure feelings about relationships with men, not much trust. Her model, or
that's one of the reasons why the promiscuity is rising, because the absent father. People think it's the opposite. Well, if the girl would stay with the mother, but the girl, the young girl, the teenage girl, needs the father as the role model to help support that.
Well, you want me to tell you something interesting about teenage promiscuity? If mom has put down dad too much, then the girl is liable to feel sorry for her dad. And this will lead the girl to take care of men. And if you can believe it or not, that's one reason the young girl will give in to when it's not her time to be having sex with a boy.
And there is a time,
she's
by the way.
going to be the caretaker, and this is what he wants. So it's all about kind of confused with what the male wants.
Right.
And she doesn't know how to take care of herself. And I see this, I have cases on my caseload of women in their 40s taking care of these fathers. And now the husband, they're starting marital problems of their own because the husband objects to the care that the person says, listen,
Yeah.
I'm your husband. And it's like competition. Why are you taking care of your father? And we have children. And it's like that's the young woman's oldest son, the oldest child. And that relationship is so strong, Chris, you can't imagine. Takes me the most incredible amount of work to get that to change.
Yeah, there's so many different aspects of the damage control we've been talking about today, and stemming from divorce that I don't know where to begin. We probably have to do another program at some point, but we only have a minute and a half left. So would you do me a favor and just see if you can? What advice would you? Because this is an advice, it's an education program. What advice would you give to the public who's watching the show, looking for information that you have to offer? And this is certainly something we haven't done before.
Well, I just want to tell them that I can't give them much in a nutshell in a couple of minutes left on TV, but I and a lawyer, Rosemary Weintraub, and myself, Debbie Byrne, we've started an organization called Smart Divorce. And what I've prepared is a series of seminars. We've given one already. The next one is November the 7th. We'll take this year it's this all-day Saturday.
And it's at Doral.
At the Doral Arrowwood Conference Center. That's in Rye.
Rye, New York.
And you can find out about it on our website, which is smartdivorce.us.
Okay.
And it's going to be a morning of legal information, and the afternoon I will do giving all that information about tips of what to do at the various ages to make sure that you minimize the damage. And it really can work out. You could even have kids that benefit from this decision if it's done appropriately.
Well, thank you very much, Debbie Byrne. This is, by the way, what's the date on that conference?
Saturday, November 7th in Rye, New York. For more information, go to smartdivorce.us.
Thanks very much, Debbie Byrne. Appreciate it. We're running out of time. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was a cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every week. We always invite all opposing views. My name is Chris DiMaggio, and thank you very much for watching FIT TV. And as usual, we'll see you again next week.